Start streaming. Let's go ahead and make sure everything's set up, and then we'll get started. So, this is day 2 of the flyweight design pattern. We had a bit of good news after we went to the kata yesterday and realized that we had already implemented part of this pattern in our game. So a lot of the heavy lifting was done for us. So today we want to deep dive into that implementation and kind of see what the benefits are. Unfortunately, we've got a problem that we can't actually play our game. So if I hit start and I just F10 here. So I'm doing a bunch of test stuff, executing commands, having them display out to the screen, but I can't type anything in, and so it makes it harder to really get a feel for how the game's coming together. So we're not going to introduce a new pattern. Really, we're going to start off on the adapter pattern, but in a very, 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 very lightweight way. But it's good to recognize what we're doing and the reason why, even though we're still in the flyweight world. So, the command line is really, really tough to parse commands from. So, I'll just let this play all the way through. So when I'm here, my only inputs are going to be text, just a line of characters. So with our flyweight pattern, everything in the game is represented by an ID, in our case a GUID. So, well, I'm not going to type out the full GUID here. If I wanted to say attack Beth, I'm not going to type out attack space 6EFJ7 dash whatever. I really just want to say attack Beth. But at the same time, I don't want to introduce that frailty to the rest of my game engine, because checking for magic strings, checking for names like Gary is going to be notoriously problematic. So I want to silo off that behavior to just the command layer. Not the command layer, the console layer, that presentation. So this is going to be my my GUI of sorts, right? Or just my user interface. But if I had another user interface, then I'd want to silo everything off in there as well. So everything has to do with rendering, everything has to do with parsing commands and translating them. I want them to only happen in the layer that is responsible for them. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'll jump right into this example. What I want to do is I want to add a new item, and I just want to call it command parser. So this is what's going to take in whatever I type into the console and translate it for the game engine. The game engine will not respond to gibberish. It will only respond to properly formed game requests. So it's going to be our job to say, okay, whatever the user says, let's try to translate that into a game request, then pass it off to the hive mind, and then do our rendering for the response. So if we go back over to the hive mind, we've got this execute command. And the execute command expects and returns, expects a game request and returns a game response. Then inside of our, let's close some of this out. Inside of our program, we're getting that to that by saying hive_mind.execute game request. Seems fair. So what we want to do, in a very, very brute way, is have our own public, let's just say, void execute string command. And this will be in charge of taking in the command trying to discern what it wants to do, passing it to the response, and then or passing it to the hive mind, and then displaying our response. So let's close out some more of this. And we're going to do this via if statements. So we're going to say if command starts with heal, else if. So we have a very limited number of things we actually do in the game. So there, else if. All right, so fight, negotiate, repair, oops. And then we're going to say, just going to say else, and then we'll render out some sorry could not parse this command. While we're here, let's go ahead and also do a short version of that same command. So we're going to say if the command starts with fight or command that starts with F space. H space, R space, in space. Okay. So, tell you what, to keep things simple for right now, because we don't want to introduce any regex yet, let's not do the shortcut, or in this case, an alias, because there's better ways to do that. So let's go ahead and say that var cmd, or we're going to say command, is equal to command, and then we can replace fight with nothing, right? So it's super simple, almost very hacky, or remove. So I'm more of a fan of replace for no real reason other than it's generally very similar when you go to like JavaScript and other C kind of languages. Definitely see replace more often than you see remove. So I like to just kind of keep my context switching to a minimum. So I'm going to say the command is the current command and just remove fight. And do the same thing throughout. It's going to be kind of sloppy, kind of scripty, but we're kind of just doing it in the moment. And it is an algorithm, so it's always a good place to come back and refactor and make a little more optimized. So the second thing we want to do is that presumably we'd have a command and a target. So for the simplicity of our command parser, we're just going to assume that the first word we get back is going to be the command, and the second word is going to be the target. You could also do this like a split. You can also split on the space and make this assumption. Obviously, when you're validating user input, it's kind of a rabbit hole. You're constantly trying to find the edge case where someone inputs a value that makes it past all of your checks and causes a runtime exception. That will always happen no matter how smart you think you are. So instead of trying to master those edge cases up front, we'll start with the simplest case, and then through our playing, we'll expand where we need to, and hopefully as we run into potential problems or gotchas, we'll cover them and evolve the algorithm as we go along. So, I assume now that if I do let's also do a trim. So what a trim is going to do is going to remove any white space at the beginning or end of whatever we have left once we remove the command. And I will change this, since we're kind of doing this and thinking through it. I'm going to assume that whatever that is going to be my target. And the other thing that I want to send in here is not just the command, but also the sender. And I'm going to assume the sender is of type iPlayer. And we'll bring that guy in. Sender, player, sender. What do you player? Okay, so now presumably I've got my command, which I know to be fight. I've got my player, which will be me. And then I've got my target. So I should have everything I need to execute this guy, in theory. And I'll import the stuff that I need. Okay. So, I also need the hive mind. That's going to be a dependency as well. So, we'll say hive mind. Alright, so what else are we missing? This will be fight always. So we need to find the sender and the target. This is the whole reason why we're doing this command parser. In other presentation tiers, like if it was the web and we had a button, we could make the value of the button the GUID, and we can make the text of the button, the target name. So it could be Beth, and you're like, oh, we'll fight Beth. Click the button, and then you'd be able to pass this more complex request up. With the command line, we've got such a simple request format, just a string. We have to be a little more creative in how we parse those commands. So I need to find Gary. Well, how do we do that? Let's go back over to our program, and we've already solved this problem in a very, very simplified way, which is we try to find the first by the name. It's a little more brittle than using the GUID, but it's what we have access to. And you're going to find that some presentation tiers are more brittle than others, and which makes some of them a joy to work with and others a pain. If you're drawing straws on your team for who's going to do the iOS front end for your multi-platform app, if you love that environment, then you're cheering. But if your comfort zone's more Android, then you'd be cursing. So this is really where you can start to, by creating these adapters and by working through these katas, you can start to say to yourself, what do I really value? What do I really value in a presentation tier? What do I really want to work with? Okay. So, oops, sorry. Command parser. I'm passing in the whole hive mind. I'm also going to need the room, the current room that I'm in. So room content, room.